Nicaragua. Several companies were formed to build one there. And the Chinese now think they're going to do it, but I'm not real optimistic. But I don't think I'll live to see it. And so there you see the bridge, and it gives you a good idea of the cut. How deep is it? 35 feet above sea level. And that's the ground. The lake is about 85 feet above sea level, but it can go down during the dry season to 80 or less, depending on how much rain they get during the dry season. But 85 feet is the official height of the water in the canal. And most ships have a draft that's sufficient. It's the problem with the width and the length. There you see a NASA photo. So there you see the bridge going across the cut. And then you come down here. That's Pedro Miguel, one set of locks, the lake, and then Miraflores, and then out. The river. The canal follows the bed of the river. The river, of course, has been covered by the lake. The river came out of the mountains, the Culebra Mountains, and went to the Atlantic. So, the bed of that river was, of course, the lowest part, so that is when ships are going through the canal, the ships follow the bed of that river. But it's now dammed up and creates the lake. So the river comes out of the mountains and it's basically ceased to exist because it's been dammed up. And here you have another view of the locks on the Pacific side. Up here you have the cut. Now this is an old picture because I did live in Panama in the 70s, 70, 71. But there you have Pedro Miguel. This hasn't changed at all. You've got Pedro Miguel. You've got Miraflores. Here's the dam that creates Lake Miraflores. Ships sail across. And then here you have the two locks called Miraflores locks. There are three requirements to go through the canal. Number one, the ship has to fit. 975 feet long, 106 feet wide, those are the maximum limits. Panamax. Then you have to pay. And you have to pay in advance. So most companies have agents in Panama City and they take care of it. When I was there, the canal was neutral, so anybody who can pay can go through. When I was there, occasionally people who were not friendly to the United States wanted to send a ship through the canal. Red China, Cuba. They did not have agents in Panama City. So the ship's captain would get off the ship with a suitcase full of $100 bills, go into the canal zone offices, pay up in cash, and then the ship would go through. The canal was always neutral. When Russian ships went through, all communications were shut down in the canal zone because we knew they were spying on our communications. So for the 8 hours it took a Russian ship to go through, the canal zone was dead to the world, so to speak. So, three requirements. You got to fit, you got to pay in advance, and you have to put the ship under the control of a canal zone pilot, or now a Panamanian pilot. And the pilot is the one that takes the ship through the canal. He doesn't himself guide it, but he tells them what to do. All of these ships, like the one you're on, when it goes into port, a pilot will come on board to navigate the harbor to get the ship safely to the dock. That's not unusual at all. And so there you see another aerial photo of people coming out of the lock, ships coming out of the lock and going into the cut. And so they are steadied in the locks by the mules, and then out here they're under their own power, about 5 knots or so. You cannot sail in the canal. I'm not even sure you could swim in the canal, as I recall. All ships in the canal, and you could take pleasure ships out on the lake, but it had to be a motorized ship. You couldn't use a sailboat.
How did they name the locks?
They named the locks after the area. Gatun was some local name that they used. And Pedro Miguel and Miraflores, that all had something to do with the local topography or whatever the Spanish had named it. Who provides security? The United States guarantees the neutrality of the canal. And we have the right to use it in times of military necessity. That was part of the Carter-Torrijos Treaty of 1978. So we still ultimately provide the security for the canal. We guarantee its neutrality. If the Panamanians decide that they were going to do something untowed, then we would go in and take them out, as we did when George Bush invaded Panama and took out Noriega. That was an interesting 2 weeks, as I recall. This is called the Thatcher Ferry Bridge. The Panamanians call it the Bridge of the Americas. Our treaty with Panama says that we will provide access across the canal from the capital to the interior of Panama. So originally we had turning bridges, and then in the 60s we built this. This is now a liability because some ships, like our sister ship, the Royal Caribbean Allure, for instance, the biggest ship in the world, will not be able to make it through the canal because they can't fit under this bridge. So that's going to be stopping them, the large ships, in the future, how high they are. Here you have a culvert under construction, 18 feet in diameter, 9 million gallons of water a minute. So it takes 10 minutes to raise or lower a ship in the locks. And all the water comes from the bottom. And here's a schematic. They can shift water forward to back or laterally, either direction, depending on where they need the water. They do try to conserve water, especially in the dry season when they tend to run short. And so the valves are controlled by that central control tower that I showed you a picture of before. They do occasionally have to clean those culverts. So here's a picture of a culvert being cleaned. And that gives you an idea of how big it is. You can control all of that water. Just incredible. This was definitely the wonder of the world. The canal zone was the biggest user of concrete when they poured the locks. And they salvaged a lot of concrete by shaking out the bags once they were emptied. And they retrieved a lot more concrete just by shaking out the bags. Then what did they do with the burlap bags? They turned them into clothes, among other things. Clothes, curtains, tablecloths. They used everything. Well, okay, the new locks. You'll have an opportunity to take a short excursion to see where they're building the new locks. And this is what they're going to look like. Old locks are here, new locks are here, but just one set of locks per side. So they're not going to be two-way, just one way. And of course, they're going to be 160 feet wide by 1,200 feet long by 40 feet deep, or 49 meters by 366 meters by 15 meters. And they're building a new channel, which will then meet the old channel, and it will go through the lake as normal. And that's what it's going to look like. They wanted to open it on the centennial of the opening of the canal, August 15th, 1914. So 2014, no, they're not going to make that date. Sometime in 2015, it will be finished and be open. And they're going to have to retain water because these locks will use so much water. There will be retention basins right here. And they will reuse about 60% of the water that comes through. And that's last year. I took the trip last year. That's what the construction of the new locks looks like. Who's paying? The Panamanians have borrowed the money from 5 banks. 5 banks have formed a consortium to loan them the billions of dollars needed to do this. And they figure the payback period will be about 12 years. Of course, they're raising the cost of going through the locks. Panama has now become very expensive to pass through. This ship will have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially since they're guaranteeing us a daytime passage. You pay extra for that. And so other shipping companies are now thinking of ways of avoiding the Panama Canal in order to save money. Many shipping companies now are redoing their shipping routes so that they can use the Suez Canal as opposed to the Panama Canal, because the Panamanian company has raised the rates so high, of course, they have to pay for the new locks.
What's the optional tour to the locks called?
What's the optional tour to the locks called? Can't hear you. The ferry option. I don't know. I just know there's the one. There are many different cruise options, shore excursion options in Panama. I like to take the one that goes and have a look at the construction. You can take a boat ride on Gatun Lake and see things that way. You can take the bus over and the train back, or the train over and the bus back. You can take a bus tour to the Pacific side and see everything there is to see over there, including Old Panama that was destroyed by privateer Henry Morgan from England. There are lots of different tours, all of them worthwhile. I've taken a lot of them. But what's that one particular one called? I don't know. They change from year to year. So there's another view of the locks under construction. It'll be interesting to see how they look this year. Are there multiple gates at each lock? In the old canal, each lock had 2 gates, just as a backup. I don't know what they're doing in the new ones. I haven't read whether they're going to have 2 gates for each lock in the new ones. But in the old canal, 2 gates for each lock in the event that one, they of course have to maintain the gates, so sometime they have to take them off, so they've got a backup for that. And then if one of the gates failed and was stuck open, they could close another gate to keep the water from flowing out. That was their reasoning behind that. So yes, they do have multiple gates in the old locks, but I'm not sure about the new locks. And there, once again, is how it's going to look on the Atlantic side, different view, with a retention basin. Fish. Fish are not a problem. No, you can go fishing in the canal. Panama means abundance of fish. And I can personally tell you from someone who did go fishing in Panama, all you have to do is throw a baited hook in the water. It could never be easier catching fish in Panama. They have lots and lots of fish. And so for that reason, they may have a lot of poverty there, at least they did when the Americans occupied Panama, but nobody went hungry because it was so easy to catch food. And you could forage the jungle. The jungle gives up many, many things that you can eat. And so they had high poverty, 25% unemployment. After we go through the canal, I am giving a speech called Panama Under the American Occupation. I'll show you some of that. But as poor people were concerned, they did a whole lot better than poor people in other parts of the world. They didn't starve. They had health care, free, and they had free public education. So they may have been living in tar shacks on the wrong side of the tracks and had no money because they had no job, but they did eat, they did have health care, and they did have education. That is a typical handicraft of Panama. These are done by the Kuna Indians who live on the San Blas Islands off the Atlantic coast of Panama. We are not stopping at the San Blas Islands. Some cruise ships do. And this is called a mola, M-O-L-A. And you will find them for sale, maybe $25, $30 in Cologne when we stop there. They are all handmade. It's called reverse applique. In other words, they put different layers of colored cloth together. They cut down to get the color they want, fold it back, and hand sew it and create a design. You can order a dress to be handmade, and they will ship it to you. And this is the traditional way for them to frame a mola. One smaller frame inside of a larger one. The Kuna Indians left Panama when the Spanish came, and they have lived very independently ever since. So they did not intermarry with the Spanish, so their culture is the same as the pre-Columbian culture that the Spanish found. So it's a very interesting place to visit if you ever get an opportunity. But in Cologne, you can buy that, and it makes a great souvenir to take home. Doesn't take up much space in your suitcase, and when you get home, you can have it framed. It's great. Also, Panama hats are not made in Panama. Panama hats were made in Ecuador. And there is a shop, at least there was last year, near the grocery store in Cologne. It has Ecuador in the name. The family hails from Ecuador. I have talked to them. I bought my Panama hat there. They sell authentic handicraft items from Ecuador, including Panama hats. You don't buy Panama hats in Panama. I mean, they're not made in Panama. They're made in Ecuador. But they're called that because everybody from Panama had one. These are two books that I recommend that you read. Really, really good. Now, the top one was a bestseller. That was back in, 1970s, I think. It was a bestseller. I'm not sure that it's still in print. But, of course, you could get it online used or get it at the library. But if you know David McCullough, he writes really great books. And he talks about the French and their attempt to build the canal, and then the Americans. It just has everything you'd want to know about the canal. I used to work these cruises, and everybody I saw had a copy of this book in their hand. But yeah, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. But like I say, I think it might be out of print, but it's always available used. And then the other one is the latest book. It's called Panama Fever. And it's about the workers. So read this one first. But this one is about the workers. Most of them, of course, were from the Caribbean. Some came from India, the Philippines, Europe, especially Southern Europe. Lots of people came to work on the canal. Over 100 different nationalities. One group of people that did not work on the canal were Panamanians. They were not interested. So they had to recruit their labor from all over the world. They were paid the same as workers in America, so it was really good wages. If you survived yellow fever, which the Spanish called el vómito negro, yellow vomit, or black vomit, and malaria. Those were the things that killed at least 30,000 workers during the construction of the canal. And I told you about the Erie Canal. 1,000 people died building the Erie Canal because there was one point, Montezuma Marsh near Syracuse. During the summer, there was malaria there. 1,000 people died building the Erie Canal from malaria. People didn't know what caused it. Malaria, mal-aire, bad air. They thought it was an airborne illness. They thought it came from swamp gas. And yellow fever, nobody had any idea. And when people said doctors discovered mosquitoes, nobody believed them. Nobody believed them. So those are two books. If you don't have them, go home and buy them and read them. They are really, really good. And that is the end of the slide presentation. I would like to tell you about a presentation tomorrow. We're stopping in Cartagena, Colombia. It is famous for its fortress, its military fortress. It was never taken by any enemy, although it was once attacked by a group of English whom the Spanish called Los Luteranos. They called them Lutherans, even though they weren't. But the English did not successfully attack the fortress. It's worth a visit. Also, emeralds. It is the largest producer of emeralds in the world, and is our onboard resident expert, Bob Drews, will tell you emeralds are more rare than diamonds, so they're a better buy. In this showroom tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Bob Drews, who hails from Cartagena, will be giving a speech on emeralds. And I have personally bought emeralds in Cartagena, and I got home and had them appraised, and I got a good deal. Of course, you kind of have to know what you're doing, which is why you should come tomorrow and listen to Bob Drews at 10 o'clock. I will be in this room at 4:30 tomorrow talking on, I think it's the people behind the canal or something. There was a lot of politics that went into this canal because we should today be going to the canal in Nicaragua. There was a company formed in America to build a canal in Nicaragua, and that's a whole other story which I will tell in another lecture. So thank you for coming. I appreciate seeing this room full. And I'm also happy that the technology finally worked. Oh. I'm not big on technology, but let me tell you, when something new comes along.